In a quaint home in Brightburn, Kansas, Kyle and Tori Breyer are in bed, preparing to make love. Kyle hopes that this time they'll conceive a baby, but Tori is tired of hoping and just wants to enjoy the moment. Suddenly, Tori feels a tremor and stands to investigate, but it stops abruptly until a loud crash shakes their home. Outside the window, they notice a bright red light in the distance. After the incident, Kyle and Tori are blessed with a son, Brandon. 10 years later, Tori checks Brandon's room to get him ready for school, but she finds it empty. They often play hide and seek, so she whistles to give him a hint, but Brandon teases her by whistling back from a distant hiding spot. Following his voice, Tori finds her way to their barn. She checks through the hay bales carefully, but doesn't find him. Suddenly, Brandon jumps out and scares her. Tori laughs at his prank, hugs him, and tells him he'll always be her baby boy. Outside, Kyle warns Brandon about the barn's safety rules, concerned for him as he heads off to school. At school, Brandon is called upon to answer a question about bees and wasps. He answers confidently, explaining that bees are pollinators and wasps are predators. He further adds that the Polis to Sulcifer is a species that lost its ability to nest and forces other species to raise their young. One of his classmates, Royce, mocks him for rambling and the class laughs, except for Caitlin. She reassures him that smart guys like him will rule the world, and they share a smile. That night, Tori checks on Brandon before settling in to paint. A red light pulses from the barn, and Brandon starts having seizures in his room. Tori hears the commotion, but when the seizures stop, she returns to her painting. Soon, Brandon wakes up and climbs out of his window, causing a loud thud. Concerned, Tori rushes outside, but sees nothing wrong. As she turns around, she feels someone run behind her. She dashes through her drying laundry and catches a glimpse of Brandon's back before he disappears. Tori follows him to the barn, where she finds him muttering strange words and attempting to open chained trap doors. Worried, she calls out to him, but he doesn't respond. She reaches out to touch him, and he slowly looks up at her before jumping in shock. Confused, Tori comforts him, suggesting that he's sleepwalking. Brandon, however, mentions hearing voices. Tori, not wanting to alarm him, dismisses it and takes him back to bed. When Kyle checks on them, Tori lies, telling him that Brandon simply sleepwalked downstairs. The next day, Kyle reveals to Brandon that he struggled when they first adopted him. When Tori leaves them alone, Kyle feels lost but manages to calm Brandon using candy, solidifying his role as a father. The two bond over their shared love for the same candy, but Kyle eventually leaves Brandon to mow the lawn. The lawnmower refuses to start at first, and Brandon's frustration grows until he hurls the machine across the yard. In shock, Brandon raises his hands, amazed by his strength. He finds the lawnmower upside down, with the blades spinning dangerously. Strange voices whisper to him, hypnotizing him into slamming his hand onto the blades. The machine breaks, but Brandon's hand emerges unscathed. On Brandon's 12th birthday, the family celebrates at a diner with Tori's sister Marilee and her husband Noah. Marilee, also Brandon's school counselor, talks about how much of a genius he is, and as a reward, Noah gives him a hunting rifle for his birthday. Kyle immediately confiscates the gun because of Brandon's age. When Brandon protests, demanding the gun from Kyle, he slams his fist onto the table, causing the arcade screens to flicker out. People stare at the commotion, and Kyle cuts the celebration short. When Brandon refuses to leave, Kyle grabs him, and the arcade screens flicker again. Tori convinces Brandon to listen to Kyle, while a waitress, Erica, watches them as they leave. Back home, Kyle and Tori discuss the changes in Brandon. Tori recalls their teenage years, saying they were worse, but her parents never cared. She vows to do better for Brandon. Kyle agrees and suggests they go camping the next day to relax. As they prepare, Tori reminds Brandon to grab his jacket, but he ignores her, continuing his breakfast. Kyle checks on him and finds Brandon eating his fork. Kyle pulls it away and Brandon gasps, waking up confused, holding the bent fork in his hand. While Tori goes to Brandon's room to find his jacket, she discovers pictures under his bed. She shows Kyle the pictures, and they flip through images of undressed women. They're initially amused by Brandon's idea of entertainment until they find pictures of human organs. Disturbed, they decide to have a serious talk with him later. While out hunting, Kyle talks to Brandon about intercourse, explaining that it's not just physical, but but about love. He tells him that it's normal to experience urges and indulge in them, suddenly introducing the concept of self-love. Brandon misunderstands, thinking it's related to a different kind of urge, and Kyle awkwardly ends the conversation. At Caitlin's home, she's abruptly woken by loud music. She gets out of bed to find her laptop playing, so she shuts it off. But when she turns back to bed, the music starts again. Alarmed, she quickly closes the laptop, only to find several notes on top. Feeling a presence looming behind her, she turns toward the window and immediately calls her mom, Erica. Erica bursts through the door, causing Caitlin to scream. Caitlin points to her window in distress, saying someone's there, but Erica finds nothing. She tries to calm Caitlin down. Tori frantically searches the woods for Brandon, but when they can't find him, he suddenly appears behind her, casually telling her he only went to pee. At school, Tori consults Merrily about Brandon's behavior at the diner. Still concerned, Merrily reassures her that it's just puberty, and Tori feels relieved. She later finds Brandon drawing symbols, but he quickly covers it up when she enters. That night, at the barn, Kyle hears the chickens being disturbed. He grabs a gun, thinking it might be a wolf, but instead finds Brandon standing eerily still, staring at the panicked chickens. Kyle reprimands him, telling him it's late and taking him home. After some rest, Kyle wakes to find the chickens dead. He shows Tori the coop and blames Brandon, explaining what happened earlier, though he reasons that a wolf wouldn't be able to break the lock. Tori doesn't believe him. At school, Brandon participates in a trust circle exercise with his classmates. When it's Caitlin's turn, she lets him fall to the ground, causing the class to laugh. She calls him a pervert and refuses to help him until the coach threatens to fail her. Angry, Brandon grabs her hand when she offers to help, squeezing it tightly until he crushes her hand. Afterward, the parents of Brandon and Caitlin meet with the sheriff in the principal's office. Erica, Caitlin's mother, is outraged by Brandon's actions and demands that he be locked up. When she learns that his punishment will only be suspension and counseling, she becomes infuriated and begins questioning whether Brandon's real mother might be a psycho. Tori defends her position as Brandon's mother and scolds Erica for targeting him. She sincerely apologizes for Caitlin's situation before leaving. As Tori and Kyle leave with Brandon, he stares menacingly at Erica. Back at home, Tori confesses to Kyle about the night Brandon sleepwalked. Kyle expresses concern about Brandon's growing obsession with the trap door. He reminds her that Brandon may not be human and worries that it could cause more harm. Meanwhile, Brandon lies in his bed, having a sudden revelation about the whispers. He heads out into the rain and makes his way to the barn, while Tori searches for answers about Brandon's origins. Tori sees a red light through the window and rushes to the barn. There, she finds Brandon, floating above the red light. In a panic, she jumps to catch him, but he falls and cuts himself on the alien ship. Seeing Brandon injured, Tori comforts him as he questions her about what he really is. Tori decides to confess, telling him about their struggles with having a baby until they finally got him. As Brandon steps inside the alien ship, he pulls away from her, upset by their lies. He runs outside, finally deciphering the whispers as "take the world," and screams with his eyes glowing red. Brandon then invites himself into Caitlin's room. She's frightened, even when he offers her flowers as an apology. He tells her she shouldn't be afraid, as she's one of the only people who knows he's special. When Caitlin mentions that her mother forbade her from talking to him, Brandon assures her he'll take care of it. Meanwhile, Erica is at the diner cleaning up when she notices strange symbols drawn on the windows. Thinking it's a prank, she calls out for Gary. The lights flicker erratically, and she looks up as the windows break. A shard of glass stabs her eye, and she painfully pulls it out, blood spraying onto the floor. She looks around, but her vision is clouded by blood. Fearing for her life, she grabs a baseball bat and swings it wildly to scare off the attacker. She locks herself in the freezer, but a hot laser splits the metal door, and it's wrenched open. Erica sees a boy wearing a cape and mask with glowing red eyes just before he kills her. At breakfast, Tori and Kyle anxiously wait for Brandon. When he arrives, they're relieved to find him calm and finally accepting of the situation. The sheriff investigates Erica's disappearance at the diner. He notices something on the windows, blows over the glass, and discovers a mysterious symbol. During Brandon's counseling, Merrily probes him about his adoption and finds that Brandon has started differentiating himself as a superior being after learning about his origins. At Brandon's lack of remorse for hurting Caitlin, Marilee urges him to open up, despite their family ties. She's serious about her work and will be providing a report to the sheriff. This causes Brandon to shake with anger. In a bar, Kyle and his friends talk about Erica's death. EJ implies Brandon might be responsible due to the incident with Caitlin, but Kyle rebukes him. Kyle worries that Brandon is becoming a monster, but Noah assures him that all children are monsters at some point. Back home, Marilee is alone when Brandon visits. He suddenly threatens her about sending the sheriff a report, but Marilee stands her ground and firmly asks him to leave. Despite his menacing smile, he complies. After shutting the door, Marilee texts Noah before going to bed, unaware that Brandon, wearing his red mask, is lurking in the darkness behind her. Brandon sneaks into her room. As Marilee sleeps, she hears Noah coming home. He brushes his teeth in the bathroom, unaware of Brandon lurking behind him. When Noah feels someone moving to his closet, he turns on the light and is startled to see Brandon wearing his mask. Noah scolds him and drags him outside to his truck. Brandon warns him not to tell his parents, but Noah isn't intimidated. The light flickers as Noah goes to the driver's seat. When he doesn't see Brandon inside the truck, he opens the door to force him in, just as Brandon puts on his mask. Noah grabs him, but Brandon shoots him down with his laser vision. Brandon disappears into the darkness, and Noah, terrified, limps to his car and drives away. After gaining some distance, Brandon strikes the truck, causing Noah to lose control. The car breaks down, and Noah desperately tries to restart it. When his headlights flicker on, he sees Brandon standing in front of the car. The lights turn off and on again, and Brandon is flying, only to vanish. Noah anxiously scans the surroundings before Brandon lifts the truck into the air and drops it. The truck crashes headfirst, causing Noah to break his jaw on the steering wheel. He passes out as Brandon uses his blood to draw a symbol on the road. Since Brandon hasn't returned home, Kyle and Tori panic. Tori calls Marilee, and Brandon enters, hiding a shirt in his hands. Tori hugs him, asking what happened, but Brandon lies, pretending to be upset about a soccer game where he was bullied. Tori and Kyle can tell he's lying, but they are at a loss as they can't easily find help for their alien son. Kyle blames himself for raising Brandon when he was never meant to be human. That night, Kyle dreams of the past. His mind takes him back to the woods to when they first found Brandon. Tori is holding a bleeding baby and offers it to him. In his mind, Kyle sees the monster that Brandon truly is. He jolts awake as Marilee calls them. The couple heads to the hospital to comfort Marilee, who's distressed about Noah's crash. She expresses concern for Brandon, and the couple is shocked to learn that he visited her beforehand. The next morning, they speak to Brandon and are disturbed by his indifference to Noah's death. Tori gently asks him if he knows anything about the incident, but he lies, claiming to know nothing. Kyle explodes, accusing Brandon of being a monster who killed Noah. Brandon doesn't take the accusation well and pushes Kyle, throwing him against a cabinet. Tori intervenes and tells Brandon to go to his room. Kyle suspects that Brandon is hiding a shirt for a reason, so while Brandon showers, Kyle searches his room and finds the shirt, stained with blood. He hides it immediately and pretends to apologize for his earlier outburst. When Kyle shows Tori the evidence of Brandon's crime, she turns a blind eye. Kyle becomes frustrated with her and, in anger, tells her that Brandon isn't their son. Tori is hurt by his words and leaves, while the sheriff investigates Noah's accident and finds the same symbol from Erica's case. Kyle looks at the baby trinkets Brandon kept and remembers the love he had for him. He turns in for bed and tells Tori that he's taking Brandon camping to fix their relationship and show him how much he loves him. Tori is relieved and lets herself be embraced by Kyle's arm. The next morning, Kyle and Brandon set off on their trip, but the journey is silent and strained. Meanwhile, the sheriff visits Tori and asks about Brandon. He shows her a photograph of the symbol found at Noah's crash site, revealing it as a combination of two-letter B's, implying it's connected to Brandon Breyer. Tori plays innocent, but the sheriff knows better. When Tori tells Brandon to leave, the sheriff warns her that he'll return. She rushes to Brandon's room and finds his notebook filled with the same symbols. Flipping through it, she's horrified to see depictions of Erica and Noah's deaths. Meanwhile, as Kyle and Brandon walk through the woods, Kyle raises his gun, aiming at Brandon while he's distracted. He sheds a tear for what he's about to do before he shoots Brandon in the head. To Kyle's shock, Brandon stands up unaffected, staring at him in disbelief. Terrified, Kyle reloads his gun, but Brandon disappears. Kyle runs, but Brandon quickly catches up, tackling him to the ground. As Kyle pleads for his life, Brandon hesitates before using his laser vision to shoot through Kyle's head, killing him. Tori desperately calls out to Kyle, but hears Brandon's voice on the phone instead. She denies Kyle's death, despite Brandon telling her directly. She then asks him where he is, and Brandon coldly tells her that he's home, before crushing Kyle's phone. Tori screams as Brandon begins destroying their home. She calls 911, but Brandon interrupts the call. The sheriff and his deputy arrive at the scene to find the Breyer home in ruins. When Tori meets them, Brandon kills the sheriff. The remaining deputy orders Tori to hide and calls for backup, but there's interference on the radio. The policewoman reports in just as Brandon shows up behind her. He slams her around the house, her body landing in front of Tori's hiding place under the bed. When Brandon checks the bed, he doesn't find her. Tori is already hanging outside the window. She falls, injuring her hand. This triggers a memory of Brandon's earlier injury. Knowing what to do, she runs to the barn with Brandon hot on her heels. She checks the ship through the trap door, and it starts glowing. The light reveals Erica's dissected body behind her. Tori cries as she recognizes her, and with a determined decision, she rips a metal shard from the ship and hides it in her back pocket. Tori calls for Brandon, luring him with whistles as if they're playing their game. Brandon finds her, and Tori slowly approaches him, trying to make him recognize the good inside himself. As she embraces him, Brandon melts into her arms. But in that moment, Tori raises her arm to stab him with the metal shard. Brandon stops her, sensing the betrayal. In a fit of rage, he shouts and takes her in his arms, crashing through the barn's roof. Tori's head is bloodied from the crash as they fly higher and higher. She touches his face one last time before he lets her go, letting her fall to her death. Brandon watches her fall and, spotting a plane in the distance, uses it to cover up the destruction of the Breyer home. He innocently eats a cookie as the news reports a mysterious plane crash, with Brandon as the only survivor.